Dear friends, in the last conference of the Apocalypse for Dummies cycle, I gave a first commentary on chapter 13 of the book of Revelation, emphasizing most of all the symbolic meaning of these beasts at the level of human experience. For example, the first beast cumulating the ferocious character of three wild beasts, and also showing that there is a kind of pseudo trinity in this chapter, with the dragon, the first beast, and the second being kind of anti-Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now I would like to come back to this chapter from a different point of view, looking at the Old Testament, because there is a passage of the Old Testament that also sheds light on this chapter of the Apocalypse. It is the book of Daniel, chapter 7. So let us have a look at it. I begin the reading at verse 2 of Daniel 7. I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and so on. The second one was like a bear. Then a third one like a leopard. And then eventually a fourth beast, terrifying and dreadful, exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth, and so on. Now, in the context of the book of Daniel, the meaning of these four beasts is relatively clear. They symbolize human empire, successive empires. The first beast would symbolize the Babylonian Empire, the second one, the empires of the Medes, the third one, the Persian Empire, and the fourth one, the empire of Alexander the Great. Now, this is interesting because it helps us to understand that we can draw a conclusion with respect to the beasts of chapter 13 of the Apocalypse. The first beast cumulating the ferocious characters of the beasts in Daniel chapter 7. Daniel 7 helps us to understand that, yes, there is a political meaning in this symbolism. You see, symbolism is very rich, as explained in the general introduction to these conferences, and you can explain symbolic images at different levels. So here, for example, we look at the way the Bible uses these images, and the Bible uses them with respect to human empires in Daniel 7. This means that there is a political meaning in this symbolism in Revelation 13. What can it be? In the historical context of the Apocalypse, what is the main human empire having domination? It's clearly the Roman Empire. This explains why almost all biblical scholars will tell you that the first beast of Revelation 13 refers to the Roman Empire. Fairly enough, even though I'd like to add a precision which I think is important, every symbol is a particular point of view. And so the first book of Revelation 13 is not so much the Roman Empire as such, but the Roman Empire in as much as it persecutes Christians. Now, it is true that at the end of the first century, there were not many Christian persecutions, But we know that there had been a first one in the 60s, the persecution of Nero in Rome. And so with Nero, the Roman Empire had begun to persecute Christians. So yes, that's part of the signification of the first beast, the Roman Empire, in as much as it persecutes Christians. Now, what about the second one? The second beast? It would seem to refer to the cult of the Roman emperor. Because when we look at the text of Revelation 13, we see that the second beast organizes a kind of pagan liturgy in favor of the first beast. And that's more or less what the cult of the emperor was doing at the end of the first century. And so, yes, that's part of the meaning of those symbolic images. The Roman Empire, inasmuch as it persecutes Christians on the one hand, and the cult of the emperor on the other hand. Now, I think that this is correct, but we also have to keep in mind that the book of Revelation applies not only for the time of John, but at all times of human history. And those symbolic images are not true only at the time of John. They are, I would say, trans-historical images. That is, images which cover all the span of human history, just as Babylon, too, is a trans-historical image. And so, if we keep this in mind, it would be a good question for us to ask, but what would those two beasts refer to in our times? Yes, that's an important question to raise. I would just like to mention one striking case in the 20th century, the rise of the totalitarian regimes, such as Nazi Germany and Communist Russia. It is so striking to see that these two countries were kind of empires. They persecuted Christians, and also they developed a kind of idolatric liturgy of the head of state. In communist regimes, they would call it the cult of personality. Yes, all the major totalitarian dictators were subject to a kind of idolatric worship. So you see that the teaching of Revelation 13 may help us to discern and to denounce and resist all kind of political regimes pretending to be totalitarian and usurp the place of God. Now, I also like to emphasize the fact that Revelation 13 is a recapitulation of the episode of the two witnesses. It speaks about the same thing, the confrontation between the beast on the one hand and the Christians on the other hand. But in chapter 11, it is seen from the point of view of the two witnesses, and in chapter 13, it is viewed from the point of view of the beast. So it's a very striking passage, really, and it is worth meditating. Now, I would like to turn to the next chapter of the book of Revelation, chapter 14. In chapter 14, we can easily see three main sections. Here I begin with the first one, beginning at verse 1 to verse 5. Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000, who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters and like the sound of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps, and they sing a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and before the elders. No one could learn that song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are chaste. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb, and in their mouth no lie was found, for they are spotless. Now we meet again the group of the 144,000 we had seen in chapter 7. I remind you that I had explained that they are kind of the Lamb's army. We see them now again on Mount Zion with the Lamb. Mount Zion was the hill on the top of which the Jerusalem temple was built. And so we can understand that it is another image of the church, the heart of the church, so to speak, and this would correspond to what we read at the beginning of chapter 11. Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there. Those who worship there, probably the same group than the 144,000. They had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads, as we had seen in chapter 7. I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters and the sound of loud thunder. So they were playing a new song, a song that they only could sing. They sing. Now, we have to be careful about the description. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are chaste. What does this mean? There are some interpretations which really almost react in an angry way against this verse, thinking that it would be depreciative of human sexuality in general and of women in particular. Now, it has nothing to do with that, really. The best way to understand it is, as usual, to look at the Old Testament and search for a passage that would use that image. And it is not very difficult. I'd like you to look at a passage in the story of David, first book of Samuel, chapter 21. What is the context of this chapter? David was trying to escape from King Saul's terrible jealousy. Saul was so jealous of David that he wanted to put him to death. And David had to escape. Now, first book of Samuel, chapter 21, we read, Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. Ahimelech came to meet David with trembling and asked him, Why are you alone and no one with you? And David said to Ahimelech the priest, The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, Let no one know anything about the matter about which I send you and with which I have charged you. Well, that's not really true, but that's not our focus here. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now then, what have you at hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here. And the priest answered David, I have no common bread at hand, but there is holy bread, if only the young men have kept themselves from women. And David answered the priest, of a truth, women have been kept from us, as always, when I go on an expedition. The vessels of the young men, that's a euphemism, are holy, even when it is a common journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy? So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord, and to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. Here we see the mention of a requirement of the law of Moses. Men going to battle had to abstain from women, had to abstain from sexual relationships. It was not a question of moral purity, but of ritual purity. We see exactly the same thing later in the life of David with the tragic story of Uriah. Second book of Samuel, chapter 11, David committed adultery with Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, and Uriah was waging war for the sake of Israel. When David learned that Bathsheba was pregnant, so he tried to hide his sin by calling Uriah for a false pretext and to have him sleeping with his wife, so that the newborn child would be considered as the child of Uriah and not the child of David. But it did not work. We read in the second book of Samuel, chapter 11, verse 10, Uriah did not go down to his house. So David said to Uriah, have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. And so David had to find another way to get rid of poor Uriah. So let us understand this abstinence from women have nothing to do with morality. It was a ritual requirement from the law of Moses. And so in the case of 144,000, what does it mean that they have not soiled themselves with women? It means that they are ready for battle. Nothing else. They are ready for battle. I think it is very important to understand this point. Let us go on in our reading. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. First fruit, this suggests that there we shall see all the fruits, probably other groups of people being redeemed by the Lamb. In their mouth no lie was found, for they are spotless. Spotless, you see, that was a requirement from the law of Moses for animals going to be offered in sacrifice. They had to be perfect. They had to be spotless. And we also have an echo of the song of the suffering servant, Isaiah 53. Isaiah 53, verse 9. He had done no violence, there was no deceit in his mouth. That's very interesting. These two echoes suggest the destiny of the 144,000. And what is the place? The Lamb is leading them 2. Just as the suffering servant of Isaiah 53 was compared to a lamb led to the slaughter, the 144,000 are led by the lamb to be offered in sacrifice, and they are spotless victims. This is very important because we see that the destiny of the 144,000 is basically the same than the destiny of Jesus, that is the cross. And the great battle the 144,000 are preparing for is the battle of the cross. Very important teaching indeed. We may turn to the second section, beginning at verse 6. Then I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth, to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. We have made that expression several times. So basically, it is mankind in its diversity, but mankind which is disputed between God and the dragon. He said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the fountains of water." I remind you that the heaven, the earth, the sea, and the fountains of water were the targets of the first 4 trumpets in chapter 8 of Revelation. It was a matter of warning the inhabitants of the earth, don't worship those physical elements of the universe, don't be idolatrous, worship God. Another angel, a second, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of her impure passion." That's the first time we see the name Babylon. She's mentioned 6 times by its name in the book of Revelation. It is a great city of chapter 11. Fallen, fallen is Babylon. It is an echo of the book of Isaiah. Chapter 21, I think. Isaiah 21:9. Fallen, fallen is Babylon, and all the images of her gods he has shattered to the ground. You see again the Apocalypse speaking the language of the Old Testament, the Apocalypse drawing from prophecies of the Old Testament, since Revelation is a prophetic book. That fall of Babylon shall be described with more details in Revelation chapter 18. Another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worship the beast and its image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also shall drink the wine of God's wrath, poured unmixed into the cup of his anger. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. And they have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name." So it is a severe warning for the inhabitants of the earth. They have to avoid, or at least to stop, worshipping the beast. They have to renounce the mark of the beast. You just cannot persevere in idolatry and be saved. Salvation implies conversion. conversion from idols to the one and only true God. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Write this, blessed are the dead who from now on die in the Lord. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them." So we just had a warning for the idolaters. Here we have one of Revelation's beatitudes. There are 7 in total. Beatitudes for those who die in the Lord. So die being faithful to the Lord, in communion with Him. They may rest from their neighbors. Notice the contrast with the lack of rest for the idolaters. They have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name. So contrast between the worshippers of the beast and the saints keeping faithful to the Lord, and they are declared blessed, and they may already rest from their labors. Next time, we shall see the third section of Revelation 14, verses 14 to 20, with the harvest and the vintage. I see you soon for the next conference.